Alira barely registered the sound of her own breathing, shallow, sharp, like wind through broken glass. The world around her was fire and ruin. Above, fractured starlight flickered between clouds of ash. Somewhere behind them hung the twin moons of Aurelia 7, their pale glow suffocated by the smoke columns twisting up from the wreckage. Metal shrieked and snapped as it cooled, warped and blackened like bones after a cremation. Her body screamed in silence. One leg was useless. Plasma had burned down to the bone, and her side felt like it had been crushed under a meteor. Her white fur was matted with soot, blood, and gel from a half-vaporized medpack. She no longer knew if the red belonged to her squadmates or herself. Her ears twitched, long, feline, and still sensitive even in agony. Something was moving through the wreckage. Heavy steps. Deliberate. She tried to reach for her sidearm. Her fingers twitched but found only scorched hole. The evac signal had gone out, but no one answered. Her name wouldn't have been on the extraction list. Not after what she'd done. Retreat protocol. Clean sweep. No survivors left behind, except the expendable ones. She turned her head with effort. The twisted hull of the recon shuttle caught firelight and cast jagged shadows across a cracked dome nearby. Behind that dome, something moved. It wasn't the loping silhouette of a Varelian hunting drone. And it wasn't tall and silver like a Kamari field unit. Two boots stepped through the broken glass. Human boots. Mismatched plating. Scuffed to hell. He crouched. Lean. One eye hidden under a soot-stained visor. The other scanned her with a glint of grim humor. Still alive? He asked, voice wrapped in static from his busted calm mask. She tried to speak. Blood trickled down her lip instead. He rummaged through a torn satchel. Here. It's either nutrient paste or ancient glue. I won't lie, it tastes like betrayal. Alira hissed weakly. Human. Yup. And you look like roadkill on fire. He pulled off his helmet, roughly mid-30s, messy dark hair, light stubble, and eyes too tired for someone still breathing. Name's Rook, he added. Damon Rook. I'd shake your hand, but you're kind of crispy. Damon Rook didn't waste time. He dug a strange gel patch from his pack, half melted, probably stolen from an abandoned triage crate, and slapped it gently over the worst of her side wound. Alira winced. Not from pain. From the absurdity of it. A human, on a scorched battlefield, trying to rescue a feline combatant from a rival faction. You should have left, she croaked, her translator implant struggling to kick in. The words came out cracked, more growl than speech. Rook paused. I get that a lot. He hoisted her with surprising care, slipping an arm under her shoulders and lifting her free from the half-melted metal pinning her down. She was light, despite her armor. Too light. Burned muscle. Dehydration. Shock. Protocol says I'm supposed to scavenge your suit and leave your sorry ass for the drones, he muttered. But screw protocol. Each step was slow and grueling. The ruined jungle around them seethed with the noises of a dying war, distant booms, metallic howls, the occasional whir of recon drones scanning for survivors. None of it mattered. Rook didn't stop. Her vision wavered. Her ears filtered the world into fragments. He kept talking. She couldn't tell if it was for her benefit or his. See, I was just here for the salvage. A couple of good power cores, maybe a medkit or two. Didn't expect a half-dead Catwoman with enough attitude to fry a mech. She tried to lift her head. Nah, cat. He looked down, amused. Yeah? Feline enhanced Corellian derivative, right? I read a briefing once. Didn't expect to meet one in person. Let alone carry her through a damn minefield. Her mind spun. Pain blurred into sound. She focused on his voice, the rhythm, the sarcasm, the warmth beneath the nonsense. Not a soldier. Not one of hers. Not even a medic. But he hadn't left her behind. By the time he reached the shattered remains of a human recon shelter, barely standing between two trees, she was unconscious again. He lowered her onto a scavenged thermal pad and wrapped what passed for insulation, half a heat blanket, half a tarp, around her. She stirred once, felt the warmth of artificial light, the hum of jury-rigged electronics, and the steady presence of something alive beside her. Not enemy, not ally, something in between. When Alira woke again, the scent of melting wire and burnt protein filled her nose. It wasn't the acrid scent of war. It was something domestic, improvised, human. She opened her eyes to a cracked ceiling, a patchwork of metal sheets, emergency blankets, and what might have once been part of a shuttle wing. Soft green light blinked in the corner from a weak power cell barely holding together a signal scrambler. She blinked. Once. Twice. A figure sat nearby, hunched over a makeshift workbench made from a stack of old ammunition crates. Damon Rook, sleeves rolled to his elbows, was poking at a sparking panel with what appeared to be a screwdriver fused to a butter knife. He looked up without surprise. "Well, look who's not dead anymore," he said, grinning through soot-smudged teeth. "That ruins my dramatic last words to a corpse speech. I had it all rehearsed." Her throat was dry sand. "Where?" He gestured broadly with a burnt glove. "Welcome to Fort Scrap and Hope. Population us. Amenities include 1/4 power cell, half a medkit, and exactly 0 plans." She tried to sit up. Pain screamed across her ribs, but she managed a slight rise. His tone shifted. Softer now. "Easy. You were fried bad. I patched you with every med item I had and maybe a few I shouldn't have used." He handed her a canister. "Hydration gel. Tastes like regret. Better than dying." She took it. Drank. The taste was somewhere between motor oil and artificial lemon. She didn't stop. "You fixed my wounds?" she rasped. He shrugged, reaching for a mug of something steaming beside him. "I tried to keep one of every alien gel in my kit. Never know when you'll find a half-dead soldier with ears like yours." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not military?" He snorted. "Me? Nah. Ex-engineer. Freelance scavenger. Sometimes smuggler. Occasionally moral disaster. Depends on the day." She leaned her head back against the curved metal wall and took a slow breath. The pain was there, but dulled. Her limbs still ached, but not like death anymore. She glanced at him. "Why didn't you leave?" He was quiet a beat too long. Then, "Didn't feel right. You were bleeding out, gasping for air like a broken vent. And? He sipped his drink. "And I've done enough running in my life. Figured I'd try the whole not abandoning someone thing for once." The silence between them hung heavy, but not cold. Not hostile. Just honest. Alira didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her ears twitched at the sound of distant thunder, not from nature. From machines. Drones still circled. But for the moment, in this scrap heap of a shelter, there was safety. And strangely, companionship. The second day in the shelter began with a thunderclap of failure. Rook cursed as a small explosion rattled the far wall, sending sparks into the air and smoke through the roof patch. Alira jolted upright, wincing as her ribs protested. Her tail twitched in alarm, bristling out from beneath the thermal wrap. "Are you trying to kill us both?" she growled, already scanning for weapons. "Relax," Rook coughed, waving away the smoke. "Just a minor setback. I was trying to jury-rig a power loop for the heater. Instead, I may have invented a new method of electrocution." Alira slid off the cot, bare feet touching the scorched floor. Her strength had returned more overnight. Her limp remained, and the burns ached with every breath, but she could move now. "Walk. Speak without sounding like death." Rook eyed her. "You're looking less like roadkill. That's a good sign. I still feel like my insides were used as plasma insulation," she muttered. "That's fair. You also look less crispy. That white fur of yours is almost fluffy again." "Almost," she hissed under her breath, half annoyed, half amused. "Corellian fur doesn't get fluffy. Could have fooled me. She bent down beside the power unit. The housing was a mess of melted wires, cracked plating, and a suspicious substance that might have once been chewing gum. She eyed him flatly. You tried to combine Komari-grade nanocells with human field batteries? It was a bold vision, he said proudly. Had a 50-50 shot. She snorted. In which universe? He shrugged. An optimistic one. She stood and turned toward the open doorway. The jungle beyond shimmered in the morning light. Strange vines had begun to creep toward the shelter, glowing faintly in the dawn. Virelia 7's flora was alive in ways most biologists didn't even try to classify anymore. Come on, Brooks said, pulling on his boots. Let's go breathe something that isn't my failed engineering. Alira followed, slower but steady. Outside, the forest had reclaimed most of the crash site. Blue moss glimmered across broken metal. Trees twisted overhead, their bark responding to movement by pulsing with light. The war still echoed in the distance, but here, under a jagged arch formed by their wrecked shuttle, there was something close to peace. Rook pointed to a rusted beam he'd turned into a bench. That's the deluxe seating. Premium spot for anxiety and existential dread. She smirked. You're not what I expected from a human. He raised a brow. What did you expect? Cold. Calculating. Dangerous. Oh, I'm dangerous, he said, flexing his arm. Especially with unlicensed power tools and questionable judgment. She stared for a beat. Then laughed. It hurt her ribs, but she didn't care. They sat in silence beneath the warped arch of steel and moss, the sky a pale green canopy above them. Alira watched the jungle pulse gently with alien life. Bioluminescent vines curled in slow spirals. Petals blinked shut when shadows passed. Even the air seemed alive, thick, humid, carrying the scent of scorched metal and sap. Rook handed her a cracked data slate. Found this in the ruins. Thought you might want to see it. She took it cautiously. The screen flickered, distorted by interference, but after a few taps from her clawed fingers, it stabilized. A message began to play, static-filled, the voice warbling through bursts of signal loss. Alira, if you're alive, respond, beacon trace initiated. Her eyes widened. That's my cousin. Lissari. She's high command. Didn't know you had family looking for you. Alira didn't respond. Her expression twisted into something unreadable, part disbelief, part fear. We weren't close. She's strict. Tactical. But loyal. The message cut off with a shriek of interference. Rook rested his elbows on his knees. So what's the play? They'll come. If that beacon activated even partially, she'll trace it here. He raised an eyebrow. Is that good? Alira hesitated. They'll assume I've been compromised, she said finally. Captured. Maybe interrogated. And if they see me with you, they'll shoot first. She nodded grimly. And ask questions never? For a while, either of them spoke. Rook reached into his jacket and pulled out a mangled piece of tech. Then maybe it's time we came up with a story that keeps us both breathing. What do you mean? Simple. We fake it. Fake what? That I captured you. Or that you captured me. Depending on who shows up first. Alira blinked. That's the stupidest plan I've heard today. Only because I haven't shared the rest yet. She sighed, tail flicking in exasperation. You're impossible. I'm adaptable, he corrected. Also allergic to death, which is why I like to stay 2 lies ahead of people with guns. Her ears twitched toward the canopy. A distant hum vibrated the air, barely audible, but unmistakable. Recon drone. High altitude. Rook heard it too. He stood slowly. They're getting closer. She clenched the data slate in her hand. I don't want to run again. You won't, he said quietly. She turned to him, eyes narrowed. You don't know that. No, he said. But I'm here. That counts for something, right? For a long moment, they just stared at each other. And for the first time since the crash, Alira felt something she hadn't allowed herself since the war began. Hope. The hum grew louder. Alira spun on instinct, her feline eyes scanning the mist above the trees. The sound wasn't the chaotic roar of battle, it was too precise. Too cold. She recognized the signature, a Kamari Mk7 recon drone. Cloaked. High altitude. Scouting ahead of a troop drop. They're scanning the wreck zone, she muttered. Triangulating signals. Rook knelt beside the signal scrambler, frantically twisting the knobs and tapping the shell like it owed him money. Our invisibility bubble is holding, but barely. I think the harmonica melted into the circuit board. She gave him a look. He shrugged. Don't ask. It made sense at the time. Her ears angled toward the north. Another vibration. Another drone. There's more than one. They're circling. Then we need to disappear harder, he said, bolting toward the mess of wires and consoles on the wall. Help me reroute the feed through the whole mesh. That dome you dragged your dying ass out of? It's got conductive plating we can use. She limped to the other side of the shelter without question. Her movements were slower, but focused now. Efficient. Precise. Survival, after all, was a skill she'd honed since long before this planet. As they worked, she spotted something flickering on the edge of her vision, a small light, blinking from an inactive panel. Her breath caught. The beacon. What beacon? Rook asked, without looking up. My emergency distress beacon. It was off. I disabled it days ago. She crossed the room in 2 limping strides, diving toward the flickering light. It pulsed now in steady rhythm, activated. No, she growled, claws slicing through the casing. It triggered itself. Autonomous override. Proximity scan. Rook froze. Which means, someone from my side just passed within 50 meters. The words hung in the air like a noose. He looked toward the trees. Ground scouts? More than likely. She slammed her hand against the panel, killing the pulse, but the damage was done. If they see us together, they won't ask questions, she said. They'll shoot. And assume I've gone rogue. Rook reached for his pack without hesitation. Then I'll lead them away. Buy you time. She blinked. What? He wrapped thermal tape around his jacket in a quick strip, the reflective material practically glowing. They want signals, right? I'll give them a signal. Big, shiny, idiotic human, over here. Don't be insane. He looked at her calm. Too late. Alira grabbed his arm. You'll die. Maybe, he said softly. But you won't. And that's a trade I'll make. She stared, caught in a moment of impossible stillness. Then, without speaking, she unhooked a slim crescent-shaped device from her belt and pressed it into his palm. A locator pulse. Silent. Steady. Just enough to be followed. Lead them west, she said. The terrain gets rough. Drones don't like uneven footing. He gave her one last grin. If I die, I'm blaming you. She bared her teeth. If you die, I'll resurrect you just to kill you properly. Then he vanished into the mist. And Alira stood alone in the silence, heart hammering to the beat of a pulse that wasn't her own. The forest closed in behind him, and Alira was left with the silence. Not peace. Not anymore. This silence was the kind that crouched, ready to snap closed like a trap. She leaned over the scanner Rook had rigged from an old medical unit and a melted drone visor. The interface was crude, but functional enough to track the locator beacon's signal, the tiny rhythmic pulse now moving westward in a slow, deliberate arc. He was doing it. Leading them away. One idiot human versus 2 cloaked recon drones and a full Corellian scout party. She hissed under her breath and returned to work. The shelter still needed reinforcing. The scrambler was barely clinging to life. And Rook's harmonica-based sabotage had burned a third of the shielding off the power loop. Typical. She rewired what she could, stripping pieces from their shattered beacon housing and using them to reboost the signal jammer's core. Her hands were fast now, confident, no longer trembling with pain. Every movement was purposeful. Adapt. Repair. Survive. She muttered to herself in Karelian. Primitive tech, patched by desperation and stubbornness. Just like the human who built it. Time passed. The scanner beeped. The drones moved. She tracked them, west, toward the locator pulse. Good. Then, nothing. The beacon signal stopped. Alira froze. The scanner whirred. No pulse. No feedback. Just static. No, 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 she muttered, fingers flying across the console. She overrode every safety, increased the amplification range, even rerouted auxiliary power from the heater. Still nothing. No ping. No Rook. He'd either smashed the beacon, or something worse. Her breath caught. Her claws dug into the console edge. And without another second of hesitation, she grabbed her half-charged rifle, slung a satchel over her shoulder, and limped toward the hatch. Her limp was barely noticeable now. The pain was background noise. Irrelevant. Because somewhere in that dense alien jungle, the only person who had saved her, who had chosen her over safety, had just gone silent. And she wasn't going to let him vanish. Not without a fight. The jungle swallowed her whole. Thick, luminous vines curled at her ankles as she pushed through the undergrowth, her fur slick with sweat and damp pollen. The deeper she went, the more alive the forest seemed. Every tree leaned toward her. Every bloom pulsed faintly as if whispering warnings. She ignored them. The scanner's screen bounced against her hip with each step, still locked on the last known coordinates of the beacon before it went dark. Alira moved fast, too fast for a recovering soldier, but not fast enough for the anxiety clawing at her chest. Bird-like creatures screeched overhead, startled by her sudden passing. She barely registered them. Every ounce of her focus was honed on the path Rook must have taken. The terrain grew steeper. Vines became thicker, bark harder. One tree she passed had a face carved into it, not from a creature, but from erosion and time, as though the jungle had grown bored and begun to sculpt itself. Virelia 7 wasn't just wild. It was watching. Then she saw it. The first drone, shattered. Smoking. It lay in pieces beside a moss-covered rock, its shell scorched, inner circuits charred from a feedback loop. The beacon's core lay nearby, cracked in half. The generator had been used as a pulse blaster. Improvised. Dangerous. Brilliant. And exactly the kind of insane thing Rook would do. She crouched beside it. The moss around the crash site still vibrated faintly, echoing with recent motion. Someone had passed this way not long ago. She kept going. The path narrowed between two leaning trees that formed a crooked arch. Blue fungus bloomed along the edges, releasing shimmering spores as she passed. She coughed but pressed on. And then, she saw him. Damon Rook sat slumped against a jagged boulder, one hand over his side, blood darkening his jacket in a slow, sticky stain. His other hand gripped the ruined beacon core like a lifeline. Alira didn't speak. She ran. Dropped beside him. Checked his pulse. Fast. Weak. But there. He stirred. Eyes barely open. Hey, either I'm hallucinating, or you look really pissed off. You're alive? She snapped, jabbing a stem injector into his neck. Which means I get to yell at you later. He winced. That's fair. You absolute idiot. I'd rather be an alive idiot than a dead hero. You're half of both right now. As the healing agents took hold and color returned to his face, he smiled. Knew you'd miss me. Alira rolled her eyes, but the relief on her face softened every line. I should shoot you for this, she muttered. I'd prefer if you didn't, he croaked. But I'll understand. She slung his arm over her shoulders. We're going back. Try not to bleed all over me. Too late. They hobbled together through the mist, wounded and battered but alive. And together again. Their journey back was a mess of staggering steps and half-mumbled jokes. Alira kept one arm firmly locked around Rook's waist, guiding his stumbling form through the brush and wreckage. His weight was uneven. He leaned too hard when the pain flared, too little when pride got in the way. You're heavier than you look, she muttered, tail flicking in agitation. I'm mostly charm, he rasped. That stuff's dense. Shut up and walk. The forest thinned as they neared the shelter. Vines recoiled from the heat of their bodies. Flowers pulsed gently with bioluminescent interest, curling open like blinking eyes. A low breeze stirred the leaves, and for a moment, Alira swore she could hear the jungle breathe. By the time they passed the perimeter, Rook's legs gave out completely. She lowered him onto the bench with care and was already at the supply crate, claws snapping open vials, snapping shut seals, moving with the practiced hands of a soldier turned nurse turned whatever the hell this situation was. He groaned. Do you do this for all the half-dead strays you pick up? No, she replied flatly, sterilizing the burn. Only the dumb ones who run toward drones instead of away. I like to think of it as strategic idiocy. She peeled back the jacket. The wound was worse than she'd hoped. Plasma scorch, deep, just shy of a kill shot. If he'd turned 2 centimeters more. Don't think about that. She worked in silence, applying a mix of her people's regenerative salve and his own crude gel. The combination fizzled on contact but stabilized with a hiss. Nanobots and proteins forming an uneasy truce. Rook watched her. You're better at this than I am. Obviously. I mean it. You've got the hands of someone who's saved lives. She paused. Her voice softened. I used to be field med. Before the recon unit. Before I started flying death traps. He winced. Let me guess. Didn't like watching people die. No, she said quietly. Didn't like knowing I could have saved them if command hadn't held me back. His gaze lingered on her face. That's why you were left behind, isn't it? She didn't answer. But her silence was heavy. Confirming. When the wound was closed, when the field foam had hissed its last hiss, she sat back on her heels, suddenly tired. You'll live, she said. Damn, he muttered. There goes my hero complex. She let out a long breath. Next time, we run together. Or we fight together. But no more of this lone hero nonsense. He grinned, tired but genuine. Deal. Outside, the stars began to rise, pale glimmers above the canopy. The war still burned in the distance, but in this little ruin of metal and moss, a strange peace settled over them. And for the first time, Alira didn't feel alone. Morning arrived slow and heavy. No birds sang. No creatures rustled the brush. Even the shelter's fire, built carefully from twisted sapwood and half-dried leaves, had burned to a faint amber glow. Too quiet. Alira crouched near the hatch, ears angled sharply. Every muscle coiled tight. Her tail flicked once, a tell she hadn't learned to hide, even during officer training. They're close again, she whispered. Rook sat nearby, bundled in the remains of their emergency wrap, cradling a repurposed heating coil like a lifeline. His color had returned, but his energy was gone, burned up by the run, the wound, and the way adrenaline fades after you've already risked everything. He didn't need to ask who they were. Instead, he muttered, Good back or bad back? Very bad, she said. Drone signature. 2, maybe 3. Patent says recon phase. He sat straighter. Can we move? We could, she said, voice tight. But they'd catch us halfway through a limp. Then we execute plan. He squinted. Plan H? We were on H, right? H was hide and hope. I'm starting to think we need plan I. He grimaced. I told you this would happen. I swear if you die again, I'll murder you myself. She moved quickly to the scrambler, what remained of it. The harmonica was long gone, its coil fused into the battery housing. The shell was cracked, the signal strength flickering. It wouldn't last another pulse. They both knew it. We'll need to reroute the feed, she said, grabbing a coil of spare cable. Use the outer mesh. Create a passive loop back that doesn't scream hello, shoot us to everything in orbit. I love it when you talk tech, Brooke said, already limping after her. They worked fast. The kind of fast you only move when survival depends on it. She handed him cables, He twisted them into place. She adjusted the scanner. He diverted power from the solar relay they'd buried beneath leaves 3 days earlier. For a moment it worked. Then the scanner pinged. Not a drone. Not synthetic. A ground signature. Corellian. Close. Alira stiffened. They're here. The drones? No, she said, voice clipped. My people. Rook looked up. And we're standing in a shelter built out of your wreckage. That's not a good look. She didn't answer. She was already moving, grabbing the crescent-shaped distress beacon from the tool bench, already calculating a dozen options in her head. Too late to run. Too stupid to surrender. We're not going to win a standoff, she muttered. I assume this is where you suggest faking my death, Rook said. No, she said, spinning toward the pod. We fake your capture. He blinked. Wait, what? She was already clearing out the escape pod they'd dragged into the clearing days ago. It still bore the scorch marks of impact, and she started arranging cables across the floor, setting up a crude visual of a holding cell. You're a prisoner, she explained. Captured, detained, non-lethal. I don't do helpless well. You do sarcasm just fine. Channel that. Rook hesitated, then gave a short nod. You really think this'll work? She paused. Then, no. But it might give us 30 seconds. He looked at her, really looked, and for once didn't have a joke ready. Then I guess 30 seconds will have to be enough. They got to work. Alira worked like someone possessed. She had Rook in the escape pod within minutes, seated with his wrists bound in a convincing loop of spare wiring. She dusted ash across his face, smudged fake burn marks into his jacket, and even tore a sleeve to suggest a struggle. It was sloppy by military standards, but believable enough. The rest was up to him. Try not to smirk, she said, straightening the cable restraints. You already look suspicious. Rook grinned. This is my natural expression. She stepped back, crossing her arms. Her armor had been hastily scrubbed, the rank crest reattached at the shoulder, a declaration of authority. A clean Corellian officer with a filthy, sarcastic human prisoner. On paper it worked. But in her gut, everything screamed wrong. Rook must have seen it in her eyes, because he softened. You okay? I don't know, she admitted. I was trained to spot deception. To recognize posturing. This entire thing reeks of both. He shrugged. You sure it's not just my cologne? She almost smiled, almost, but the tension wound too tight around her spine. They'll come in fast. They'll be armored. If they shoot you first and ask later, then I'll die looking pretty and tied up. What a legacy. She knelt beside him, her forehead touching his for a heartbeat. If this goes wrong. It won't. If it does, I'll haunt your barracks. Whisper bad jokes into your ventilation system. She stood as the roar of engines split the sky. Twin thrusters appeared overhead, cutting through the clouds like the blade of a god. Trees bent from the force. The moss recoiled. And a brilliant amber beam lanced down into the clearing, illuminating the pod like a stage light. Alira stood just outside its glow, armor gleaming, tail still, eyes locked forward. This was it. The dropship landed hard. 6 soldiers disembarked in perfect formation, silver-plated armor, visors down, weapons primed. Their movements were flawless. Inhuman. Corellian elite scouts. And at their head, Commander Vena, Alira whispered. Her cousin. Lissari Vena stood taller than her, features sharper, posture rigid. Her expression didn't crack as her eyes swept the scene, the pod, the prisoner, the burned trees. Then she spoke, voice cold as polished steel. Lieutenant Alira, you are alive. I am, Alira said. And I have intelligence. Lissari's gaze fell on Rook. Explain. Alira stepped forward, tone firm. Human scavenger. Located me post-crash. Treated my wounds. He hid me from drones. I owe him my life. The soldiers didn't move, but the air around them grew colder. Rook lifted his head slightly. Hi! I'm the charming prisoner. No one laughed. Lissari's visor retracted, revealing blue eyes full of frost. He is human. He is not hostile. He is unauthorized. Alira's voice dropped, sharp with command. He is under my authority. This op is mine, and I will vouch for him. The silence was thick. Then Lissari turned. Unbind him. Escort both aboard. Command will decide. Rook blinked. That's it. I was expecting at least a stun blast. As the soldiers moved to unshackle him, Alira didn't smile. But her shoulders eased, just slightly. The ship's interior smelled like ozone, metal polish, and disinfectant. Cold. Controlled. Every surface was matte black or brushed silver. The lighting was stark, no room for warmth here. Alira and Rook were led down a narrow corridor flanked by guards. No words were exchanged, but she could feel the judgment pressing in from all sides. Every eye behind every visor whispered the same thing. Traitor. Rook limped slightly, trying to keep pace despite his healing wound. He kept his eyes forward but leaned in toward her once, muttering under his breath. Are we headed to interrogation, incineration, or vacation? Depends who's on shift in command. He swallowed. I vote vacation. They passed through a decontamination chamber. White light surged over them, cleansing, scanning, cataloging. Alira's fur bristled under the pass of the molecular filters, but she endured it. Rook, on the other hand, let out a dry cough. So this is what it feels like to be judged by a microwave. She elbowed him lightly. They were deposited into a holding chamber, clean, wide, bare but not hostile. No restraints. No weapons. Just an observation node in the upper corner, blinking red. The door sealed shut behind them. Rook exhaled slowly, then dropped onto the nearest bench with a groan. Okay. So far, not dead. That's a win. Alira stood near the wall, arms crossed. Her tail swished once, then stilled. They'll deliberate, she said. Assess the situation. Decide what to do with you. With us, he corrected. Let's not pretend you're walking out of this untouched. She didn't argue. Instead, she watched him. Not just his posture, but his eyes, the way they scanned the room, calculating, alert. He wasn't military, not officially. But he'd survived enough war zones to act like one. You could have run, she said quietly. He looked up. So could you. She turned her head, ears twitching. You risked everything on a hunch. That I wasn't your enemy. He nodded. And you proved me right. I wasn't sure you'd make it out of that forest alive. I wasn't sure you'd come back from me. Silence stretched between them. Not awkward. Just full. Rook's smile was faint. So, what's next? Alira sighed. They'll question us separately. Tear the truth out in pieces. Probably detain you. Possibly deport you to a holding moon for non-aligned species. Sounds cozy. She leaned back against the wall, finally letting herself exhale. Or, if I speak clearly enough, if I take the hit, they'll assign you to me. His brow lifted. As what? A political inconvenience? A liaison, she said. Or a liability. Depends who writes the report. He studied her for a long beat. Then, I'll take it. As long as it means I'm not being dissected in a lab somewhere. She tilted her head slightly. You sure? My people aren't known for their hospitality. No offense, he said, stretching his legs. But after nearly being plasma cooked, buried in a collapsed shuttle, hunted by drones, and patched up with medical goo that smelled like glue and regret, I think I'll take my chances. She looked at him, not as a prisoner, not as a stranger, but as something in between. Something like an ally. The door hissed open 2 hours later. Commander Lissari stood alone in the frame, helmet cradled under one arm. Her expression hadn't changed, carved from cold protocol, eyes like frost glass. Lieutenant Alira. Step outside. The human remains. Rook lifted his hand like a student. Should I be worried about that phrasing? Neither woman answered him. Alira followed her cousin down a sterile corridor lined with encrypted access panels and pressure-sealed doors. The deeper they went, the more the air felt thinner, heavier, like breathing inside a command report. Finally, Lasari stopped inside a briefing chamber. The lights dimmed as a tactical projection flickered to life. Terrain scans, beacon data, drone movements, even a distorted playback of Alira's original distress ping. All of it neatly catalogued. All of it weaponized. This, Lasari said without turning, is a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. Alira said nothing. You should have activated the beacon the moment you were operational. I wasn't alone. You were supposed to be dead. I wasn't. And you brought a scavenger back with you. An unregistered human with military scrap embedded in his gear and sarcasm for a brain. Alira crossed her arms. He saved my life. That doesn't make him safe. A pause. Then Lasari sighed, the sound of a ship venting pressure. You always did bend protocol. But this is different. This isn't about you breaking rank. It's about what you brought back. Alira frowned. He's not a threat. He's an anomaly. One command can't explain. And in wartime, unexplained things get erased. Lasari turned. Her voice softened, just barely. You bonded with him. I can see it. It's in your eyes. You wouldn't be standing here otherwise. I trust him. That's your problem. Another pause. Then the projection changed, a transport route, highlighted in green. You have two options, Lasari said. One, we detain him. Process him. Quietly. He vanishes into the system. No questions asked? Alira's ears folded back slightly. Or two, Lasari continued. We assign him to you. On paper, a liaison. Off paper, your burden. Your responsibility. If he screws up, you're the one who burns for it. I'll take option two, Alira said without hesitation. Lasari raised a brow. You didn't even let me finish the fine print. I've read enough reports to know what it costs. I'll pay it. Her cousin's lips thinned. You're certain? He's the reason I'm alive. And if command questions your judgment, then they'll have to question mine and his. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Two officers. Two family members. Two sides of the same cracked glass. Then Lasari nodded once. He's yours. She turned toward the door. But Alira? Yes? If he betrays you, even once, you'll have to choose which side of the gun to be on. Alira didn't flinch. I already did. The door slid open again with a soft hiss, and Alira re-entered the holding chamber. Rook looked up from where he sat cross-legged on the bench, chewing on what might have once been a ration bar. So, good news, or am I being turned into spare parts? She stopped just inside, arms folded. You're not being executed. Hell yeah. That's a win. What's the catch? You're officially my problem now. He blinked. Come again? You're being assigned to me as a non-combatant liaison, she said evenly. Unofficially, I signed for your life. If you screw up, I pay for it. Rook whistled low. Wow. You sure know how to pick a first date location. Don't make me regret this. He stood, slowly, still stiff from the wound, but upright. So what now? Am I your assistant? Intern? Pet war criminal? You're an observational foreign asset, she said, quoting from memory. Which basically means, follow orders, stay quiet, don't touch anything glowing. He stepped closer, studying her face. You sure about this? I just argued with one of the most feared tacticians in our command structure to keep your sarcastic ass out of a detention cell, she said. So no, I'm not sure. But I'm not letting them disappear you either. For a second, he didn't say anything. Then, gently, thanks. She gave him a small nod. You can thank me by not blowing anything up. Low bar. I'll try not to trip over it. Alira glanced at the ceiling vent. She knew Command was listening. This whole conversation was probably being logged, filtered, analyzed. Every word, every breath catalogued by some unseen officer behind a screen. But she didn't care. She turned to Rook. We're leaving in 3 hours. You'll get a bunk assignment, uniform regulations, and a translator patch so you stop butchering my language in front of my people. He smiled. You mean I won't get to charm them with mispronunciations of your name? I will personally throttle you. Duly noted. She started for the exit. Try not to touch anything sharp while I'm gone. Sharp things are afraid of me, he called after her. Her ears twitched, amused despite herself. When she was gone, Rook sat back down slowly, letting the silence settle in. For a brief moment, the ship didn't feel like a prison. It felt manageable. He leaned his head back against the cool wall and closed his eyes. I don't know what the hell I just signed up for, he muttered, but at least I'm not doing it alone. 3 hours later, Rook stood in front of a steel-framed mirror, fidgeting with the stiff, angular cut of a Corellian-issued utility jacket. It was charcoal gray, too tight at the shoulders, and smelled faintly of machine oil and sterilizer. I look like I'm about to teach a seminar on how not to handle alien diplomacy, he muttered. Behind him, a Corellian technician rolled their eyes and handed over a translator patch. Place it behind your left ear. It'll sync to your neural rhythm. He winced as it latched on with a metallic click. A low hum buzzed through his skull. Congratulations, the tech deadpanned. Now your idiocy can be universally understood. Thanks, he said. I aim to disappoint in multiple languages. He was escorted out of orientation without ceremony. No welcome, no warning. Just a hallway full of steel panels and judgy side eyes from soldiers walking by. Alira met him at the threshold to the forward wing. She was back in full armor now, gleaming plates fitted perfectly to her frame, rank insignia proud on her shoulder. She looked like someone who belonged here. He looked like an awkward tourist at a weapons expo. You clean up strange, she said. You give me itchy clothes and a buzzing in my skull, and I start to rethink my life choices. She snorted. Good. That means you're adapting. They walked together through the long corridor of the transport ship. Transparent panels offered views of the stars outside, glittering like distant bullets suspended in velvet. Where are we headed? He asked. Orbital Outpost Variant 6. It's a staging ground. Secure, mostly off-grid, and just far enough from Central Command that they can pretend we're not a problem yet. And what happens once we land? She glanced sideways at him. You'll be under constant observation. Limited access. Limited autonomy. But, if you prove you're not a threat, they might upgrade you from suspicious asset to nuisance we tolerate. He put a hand to his chest. I dream big. She stopped just before the elevator hatch leading to the primary deck. Her tone turned more serious. Rook, once we're on that station, everything we built back on the surface, our trust, our survival, all of it, it'll be questioned. Doubted. Maybe dismantled. I know. They'll try to drive a wedge between us. Use me to manipulate you, or vice versa. He stepped closer. They can try. Her ears flicked once. She hesitated. You don't owe me anything, she said finally. Not anymore. He looked at her a long moment. Then shook his head. Yeah, he said. I do. The elevator opened with a soft chime, and they stepped inside. Neither of them spoke as the doors closed, sealing them into a future no protocol manual had ever prepared for. The shuttle broke through Virelia 7's orbit with a low hum, cutting across the gravity threshold like a scalpel. Rook leaned toward the observation panel. Outpost Variant 6 came into view, a ring-shaped structure suspended in orbit, metallic and sharp, like a floating blade against the stars. Lights blinked along its edges. Docking pylons extended like skeletal arms, each humming with energy fields and weapon scanners. Friendly-looking place, he muttered. Alira, seated beside him, didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the interface display, watching as flight control began automated clearance. Inside the cabin, only a few other Corellian soldiers rode with them, silent, unreadable, never meeting Rook's eyes for more than a second. He could feel their disapproval like radiation. As the docking clamps locked in with a low clunk, a voice crackled overhead. Shuttle TK-9 secured. Crew and personnel cleared for disembarkment. The bay doors hissed open. Aelira stood smoothly. Stay close. No sudden moves. No heroics. Define sudden, Rook said, adjusting the collar of his still uncomfortable uniform. She led the way down the ramp. The docking bay was massive, sterile, armored, humming with shield arrays. A line of officers stood waiting. One of them, tall and narrow-faced with slitted pupils and crimson armor trim, stepped forward. Lieutenant Aelira, the officer said coolly. And the human. Rook offered a lopsided smile. Hi. Big fan of your metal floor. Aelira shot him a look. The officer didn't blink. Director Valen. She addressed him. As ordered, I've delivered the survivor of the incident on Virilia 7. Asset Rook Damon. Human origin. Attached to my oversight. Valen's gaze didn't shift. We'll determine his worth soon enough. He turned to Rook. You'll be assigned quarters in the auxiliary wing. Guarded. Your communications will be monitored. Any attempt to breach protocols will be considered an act of aggression. Do I get a welcome basket? Rook asked. Valen didn't answer. He gestured curtly to a soldier. Escort him. Aelira stepped between them. I'll accompany him. He's my assignment. My responsibility. Valen raised an eyebrow. You presume your authority still holds? It was cleared by Commander Lasari herself, she said. Unless Command has revoked her sanction in the last hour. The two stared at each other, a brief storm of tension sparking silently. Then Valen relented. Very well. But he remains your burden. If he falters, you answer for him. I accept, Aelira said. The escort stepped aside. Rook exhaled slowly as they walked past. That guy, he muttered under his breath, has the warmth of a dying sun. They all do, Aelira said. Welcome to Corellian Command. Their assigned quarters were Spartan, 2 connected rooms and a shared interface hub. The walls were brushed alloy, the furniture bare, the lighting tuned to a sterile blue-white glow that made Rook feel like a specimen under examination. He dropped onto the edge of the cot and let out a sigh that sounded deeper than just physical exhaustion. Aelira stood near the wall interface, cycling through the security parameters. Surveillance is live, she said. No mics in the sleeping quarters, but video is active everywhere but the washroom. Cozy, Rook muttered. Is this the Corellian version of a honeymoon suite? She didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she tapped a command into the panel and brought up a list of restricted zones. Your clearance level is minimal. No weapons, no comm access beyond what I authorize, and you can't enter any command centers without me. I'm sensing a pattern, he said. It's like everyone assumes I'll try to hack your planet and run off with your secrets. Can you? Probably, he said with a shrug. But I'd leave a note. Aelira exhaled sharply, not a laugh, but close. He watched her from his cot. Her posture remained alert even here, even behind locked doors. Tail still. Ears tuned. Armor plates removed but bodysuit intact, like she wasn't willing to be vulnerable, even now. You don't trust them, he said softly. She looked at him. They're my people. That doesn't mean they're safe. He nodded slowly. And me? She didn't answer at first. Then, you're unknown. But you've bled beside me. That's not nothing. He leaned back on his hands. I'll take that as a maybe not completely hated. Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. But something. Outside their sealed door, footsteps echoed down the corridor, sharp, precise, unhurried. Patrol patterns. Measured movement. They were already being watched. Catalogued. Inside, Rook rubbed at his eyes. You know, back home, I had a plan. Scavenger retirement plan? No, he said. I was going to fix up a crawler rig. Strip it down, turn it into a mobile bar/repair station. Call it the Rusty Circuit. Park it in neutral zones, serve questionable alcohol and great advice. She blinked, ears twitching once. That's oddly specific. He smiled faintly. It was stupid. But it was mine. She turned away before he could see the softness in her expression. Get some rest, she said. We report to Varen Six's council tomorrow. The real tests start then. Rook nodded. Yeah. Can't wait to be interrogated by lizard-suited warlords who think sarcasm is a war crime. She paused in the doorway to her side room, glancing back. And Rook? Yeah? Thanks for not running. He grinned. I'm too tired. Besides, I'd miss the way you glare at me. The door slid shut between them, but for once, it didn't feel like a wall. It felt like trust, quietly building between two survivors from opposite ends of the galaxy. The next morning began with silence. No alarms, no announcements, just the soft illumination of the overhead glow slowly intensifying to match Varen Six's artificial dawn. Alira was already suited up by the time Rook blinked awake. Up, she said, tossing a clean tunic toward his face. Command wants us in the council chamber in 20. He groaned into the fabric. You ever consider mornings might be a war crime? She didn't answer. Just clipped her armor into place with the mechanical finality of someone used to being judged before breakfast. Rook washed up, dressed, and followed her into the corridor where a silent escort waited, 4 officers in deep crimson armor, faces obscured behind opaque visors. Not a word was spoken. They didn't need to speak. Their posture said enough. You don't belong here. The walk through Varen 6 was long, past research bays, drone hangars, neural uplink chambers, and sealed vaults glowing with alien tech Rook could only guess at. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. This wasn't just a station, it was a stronghold. A brain. A weapon if needed. Finally, the chamber. It was circular, high-ceilinged, acoustics engineered for authority. At its center, a hexagonal podium of shimmering alloy. Around it, 6 elevated platforms, each hosting a seated counselor, Corellian elites in ceremonial armor and neural-augmented regalia. They didn't look like politicians. They looked like war. Rook stepped beside Alira on the lower platform. She didn't look at him, but he could feel the tension radiating off her shoulders. A voice rang out. Smooth. Mechanical. Male. Lieutenant Alira, you have breached established recovery protocol. Your transmission was unauthorized. Your delay compromised the extraction window for your squad's remains. Alira's jaw tensed. I was critically wounded. I made a judgment call to go dark. Another voice, female this time, clipped and sharp. And during that time, you made contact with an alien scavenger of unknown allegiance. He saved my life. Twice. He accessed Corellian medical equipment. With permission. He reprogrammed a signal jammer with human code. It worked. He is unauthorized. Rook held up a hand. Still right here. The room didn't blink. They didn't even flinch. Rook had never felt so alien in his life. One counselor leaned forward, older, armored in black with a strange insignia etched into the shoulder. Human. You entered a restricted zone during an active operation. Do you deny this? No, Rook said. I walked into hell and pulled your officer out of it. Murmurs. Low. Unreadable. The black-armored counselor's tone never changed. Why? Rook glanced at Alira, then at the floor. Because I've left too many people behind in my life. She didn't deserve to be another. Another pause. Another silence. Then, you have no formal military training. No diplomatic license. No binding treaty protecting your existence in this system. Rook spread his arms. Yeah, and yet here I am. Alive. Helpful. Housebroken. Alira choked down a laugh. For a moment, the entire room was frozen between offense and curiosity. And then the head counselor spoke, final and absolute. Until further notice, the human asset is to remain under direct oversight of Lieutenant Alira. He is not to access secured systems, leave orbital jurisdiction, or engage in unsupervised contact with Corellian personnel. Rook gave a mock salute. Happy to be your favorite liability. The lights dimmed. The council vanished behind phased shielding. And Alira finally turned to him with something almost like a grin. You're terrible at diplomacy. He grinned back. Yeah. But I make great company. They stood together in the observation chamber, no guards this time. No orders. Just silence and a view of the stars. Virelia 7 turned slowly beneath them, a green and silver globe scarred by war, but still breathing. Still alive. Like them. Rook leaned against the railing, arms crossed loosely, eyes distant. You ever think about going back down? Alira didn't answer at first. I do, she said finally. Sometimes I think about finding the crater where the shuttle died. Standing in it. Just to see if I left something of myself behind. You did, Rook said, turning to her. And something better crawled out of it. She gave him a look, half skeptical, half grateful. They hadn't been called before the council again. They hadn't been reassigned, exiled, or disappeared. Instead, they'd been quietly absorbed. Papered over. A footnote in a war that demanded cleaner narratives. Alira had retained her rank. Rook had become her observational liaison. Neither of them knew how long it would last. But no one had come to separate them. Yet. I keep wondering when the other boot drops, he said. When they tear this apart. They might, she said. But we're still standing when we weren't supposed to be. That's already rebellion. He looked at her. So what now? We wait. We watch. And we make ourselves useful. Not exactly the dream. No, she agreed. But it's a start. They stood in silence again, watching the stars. Below, the war rumbled on. Somewhere, other survivors were crawling from other wrecks. The galaxy wasn't ready for peace. Not yet. But for now, in this quiet corner of space, there was something fragile and real holding between them. Trust. Not built in a day, or even from a single rescue, but from every word after, every wound patched, every laugh cracked between moments of fear. Alira turned toward him. Her voice was soft. You were right back in the jungle. He blinked. About what? That maybe we were supposed to find each other. He smiled, not wide, not cocky. Just real. I've been wrong about a lot of things, he said. I don't mind being right about this. She stepped closer. Not as an officer. Not as a survivor. Just as herself. Her forehead touched his, just briefly, a gesture that didn't belong in any protocol manual. He didn't flinch. He didn't even breathe. I'm not going back to who I was, she whispered. He nodded. Good. Because either of them were. When she pulled away, they both looked out at the stars again. They didn't need to speak. They were no longer just human and Corellian. They were something else now. Together.